How's it going, Radical viewers? Grim Gaddy right back into it with something different. A new series of rolling out characters in Baldur's Gate 3, which has recently become my super fixation, as this has been probably the most fantastic virtual Dungeons & Dragons 5e experience I've ever laid my hands on. Everything from the characters, the plot, the character creation, classes, mechanics, the lore, it's all there. It's all Dungeons & Dragons, and it's all fantastic. So, without further ado, we're going to be starting off this wonderful new series with one of Faerun's most celebrated and well-known heroes, the Under-Elf with a sense of self, Drizzt of Menzo Berenzon. For your convenience, I also have timestamps down below in the description of the video for those who just want to jump into the meat and potatoes of stats and a level guide. But those who wish to know more, hey, stay tuned as we speak on one of the most well-known and legendary rangers of the Sword Coast.
You can set it all on fire.
Drizzt, born as the third son of Matron Malice, faced peril the moment he was brought into this world, as he was due to be sacrificed, as was tradition under Lolth the Spider Queen. However, be it ill fortune or grim fate, his life was spared due to fratricide within his family during the moments of his birth, making him not the third, but the second son of House Doradin. Drizzt spent a lot of his young life as most noble male drow do, being whipped, beaten, and berated, belittled as was tradition within drow society. Soon coming to age to learn from the weapon master of House Doradin, quickly finding himself not just competent, but a prodigy with twin blades, which would go on to become his chosen combat style. Years would pass, and Drizzt would become a young man of a drow who drew the ire and envy of his peers, soaring to the heights of Melee Macvir and competent within the school of Sorcerer. There was one nagging feeling, however, that would never leave Drizzt's thoughts, and that was how cruel his kinsfolk were. So much it disturbed him to know he may be doomed to very similar ideals. Until, due to another stroke of fate or luck, he found himself with an opportunity few drow would consider in any serious thought, fewer would attempt, and even less would survive. And that was escape. With a trusty astral panther he befriended, 10 years of surviving the Underdark, and a tenacity unrivaled, he soon found himself up on the surface world. Finding himself turned away if lucky and outright attacked when not, there was little succor and solace to be found at first for Drizzt, until a chance meeting with an old blind ranger and an introduction to the ideals of Maliki began his path of becoming a ranger himself. To say more than this would begin to spoil a long and very enjoyable book series that I personally would recommend for those who enjoy a good fantasy, Dungeons & Dragons, or simply wish to know why this dark elf has so much attention, lore, and copycats written down on character sheets, myself included. So, without further ado, let us move on to our stats at level 1. Now, starting off with the character creation, it's as simple as first selecting custom male body type 2. Simple as that. Going to race, Drizzt is a dark elf, also known as a drow. Ergo, we're going to go ahead and just select drow. With drow, you get a number of things, many which aren't even listed here. You actually get a selection of spells as you level up, fairy fire, darkness, and they become all but essential to some of the playstyle I've ended up incorporating into my own Drizzt build. You also get perception, skill proficiency, which is just handy no matter what. Drow weapon training, proficiency with rapiers, short swords, and hand crossbows. You're not really going to see a whole lot of use out of that, and ultimately the class we're going to pick, it's not even going to matter. You'll have proficiency with just about everything. Superior dark vision, can see in the dark up to 80 feet. This is situational, but still very welcomed. Everyone loves to scream, "I have dark vision," whenever they enter a dark room. Fey Ancestry, having advantage on saving throws against being charmed and magic can't put you to sleep. This actually has come in handy a few times in my playthroughs with my Drizzt knockoff. And I'm not gonna lie, yeah, I all but swear by elves for utility purposes and character creations now. As to what kind of drow we are, Drizzt was born as a low-sworn drow. I say born, but it wasn't long before he quickly found that he did not line up with the same ideals as his dark-skinned brothers, sisters, cousins, family, and kinfolk. So we're going to go with the Seldarine drow. I love this because you get all the benefits of being a dark elf in the game with all the dialogue options, with a few new added ones to kind of point out, hey, we're not all like that. Not all of us are slavers that are going to whip you and carve the meat off your bones or anything like that just for saying something unkind to us. Now for classes, this is going to be an absurd bit of a multi-classing. We're going to start off, first and foremost, with Fighter. As Drizzt's formative years are filled with combat training by his father, Zaknafane, the weapon master of the Do'Urden house. With this, we get Second Wind, which is a nice kind of emergency heal for when we're out of health potions or clerics out of spell slots. Strength and con saving throw proficiencies, they are what they are. They're useful when they're used, and more often than not, we kind of wish we had a few others. You also get simple and martial weapon proficiency, so you can use anything, light, medium, heavy armor proficiency, and shield proficiency. If it's a weapon, armor, or shield, you can use it. For fighting style, I like to start off with defense. This helps increase our survivability a little bit, as well as kind of just being a beautiful benefit all the way to endgame. +1 armor class is nothing to shrug at. That said, if you prefer to go more of a damage-dealing DPS setting, you can start off with 2-weapon fighting just to get an ability modifier on your offhand weapon attacks, which will put out more damage in the beginning. But do bear in mind, you may not end up keeping this. You may very well end up respecting this down the line and removing it completely, as we can find armor and bracers that will give us this feature. As for background, Drizzt Do'Urden throughout his entire life has been many things. He has been a surface raider for the drow back when he was with them. He's been a ranger, he's been a guide, he's been a caravan guard. He's been just about anything. He's even been a sailor and a pirate hunter. And his legend grows more and more as the years become decades and decades become centuries in Faerun. For this reason alone, I go with Folk Hero. If you're going for a classic, good, Drizzt is a paladin, not paladin playthrough, Folk Hero will get you the most bang for your buck when it comes to inspiration, as you'll be constantly saving people. For the ability scores, we're going to go ahead and knock strength down to its most base level. We're going to jack our dexterity and our constitution. We're going to put our +2 into dexterity. We're going to put our +1 into wisdom. And by the end of all, your stats should look as thus: 8 in strength, 17 in dex, 14 in con, 10 in intelligence, 14 in wisdom, and 12 in charisma. The reason why I have this dexterity at 17, I'll have them all even numbers, is simply because you quickly find a lot of permanent stat boosts in the game, pretty early on in fact. And having an uneven number for your stat isn't necessarily the end of the world, I find. In fact, if anything, you almost want them everywhere, because you never know what you want to fill in with whatever little potion you happen to bargain some poor soul out of, or manage to convince some horrible, aberrant creature to spare its life and gives you a very particular boon or gift. It's Dungeons & Dragons. Anything can happen. For our starting skills, we're going to put a point into acrobatics. As is one thing Drizzt Do'Urden is, it's impeccably balanced. He's been told to have perfect balance. And given his entire life and constantly wielding 2 scimitars and attacking with such a grace and a speed is unmatched, acrobatics fits the bill for what we're building here. For our second, we're going to put it into insight. If it's one thing Drizzt learns pretty quick, it's how to read people and how to read a room. Insight makes sense, and in the game, it makes some interesting conversations happen. Moving on to appearance. Voice is mostly dealer's choice, as there isn't necessarily a recorded known voice for Drizzt. There have been many voice actors who have voiced Drizzt throughout the years from various games, such as Dark Alliance and the like. However, we don't really have a set voice for Drizzt, so it's really just up to your own personal interpretation. I stick with one. It sounds good to me. It seems fine. For the head, we're going to go for option 5 here, which I like because it may not have the angular features I would want out of what I would normally associate with a beautiful male drow. It is a handsome and rugged looking drow with a strong chin. Not quite the direction I wanted to go with this, but I will say it works. For skin color, I constantly find myself at odds with a variety of colors. I do like Ash Tone 9. It's kind of that nice darker purple that, if need be, we can actually lighten up. Kind of match what I'm thinking of for Drizzt's actual skin color, as the way it's described or even depicted in books changes throughout the years. It gets kind of absurd. But falling into one of the higher end ash tones, or even some lighter wisteria tones, all will lend credence to your Drizzt. Me personally, I like Ash Tone 7 for this particular moment. It's what's singing out to me. Maturity, freckle quantity, freckle intensity, vitiligo, pigmentation, heterochromia. Yeah, we're not going to need any of that. For eye color, most Dark Elves when they're born, in fact the majority of them, are born with red eyes. This is the common trait among them, I find. Drizzt, though, when he was born, he was something of an aberration, as his eyes were rather light, but also deep and almost hypnotic kind of lavender and purple. And thus, that's why I'm so happy we actually have drow purples as options. No tattoos. We are given an eye makeup style right out of the gate, though this can be removed or changed depending on how you're feeling about it. I will say that the eye makeup actually lends quite a bit of character to the look, but it doesn't need too awful much. Makeup color, lip tint, scarring, none of that. For the hairstyle, many options are available. The one I appreciate the most, however, for this particular look is the Rover's Tumble. It's nice, it's long, it's flowy, and it sings Drizzt to me. And finally, we have to give our Drizzt his proper name. And there we go.
You need a guardian. Choose one.
As for the Guardian, I kind of leave that up to player interpretation. Me personally, I actually recreated what I think Caddy Bree would kind of look like in this game for this. But by all means, use your own judgment and discretion. Who knows who your Drizzt might kind of casually see as a possible friend, ally, or potential lover. And depending where you are in the book series, I mean, it's actually kind of likely. But we're not going to do anything for this. Now, as for the rest of the levels we're going to throw on a Drizzt, again, we're going to stick with Fighter basically for the first 4, possibly 5 levels if you really feel like you need the extra attack. Because even after we get 4 levels of Fighter down, we're not even going to be touching Ranger until we get at least 2 levels of Barbarian. With level 2 Fighter, you of course get Action Surge, which is fantastic, and I feel is a perfect mimicry, so to speak, of Drizzt ridiculous speed with his twin scimitars. At Fighter level 3, we can pick up a specialization, another hit point increase. And for this, it's interesting. It really kind of depends on how you want to play Drizzt. If you kind of just want to mindlessly carve through things with twin scimitars, Champion you can't go wrong with improved critical hits, which lets you crit on 19s instead of 20s. This happens way more often than you give it credit for, I promise. And there's some interesting swords that actually work really well off of that and even add to it. But if you want some more versatility in your Drizzt build, Battlemaster will grant you that utility. It'll make your attacks be able to do far more than just flat out damage, as well as increasing the damage. As for which maneuvers to pick, honestly, I will mostly leave that up to dealer's choice. I personally think Trip Attack is a godsend from time to time. Menacing Attack does wonders. And Riposte is just hilarious. Because honestly, I don't use my reactions enough. The thought of something missing me because I just parried him and I just stab him with a scimitar feels very Drizzt to me. Along with this, because we're a drow, we also managed to pick out Drow Magic Fairy Fire, which comes in handy a lot, and Drizzt does use a lot in the Arya Salvatore novels. Fire level 4, we're going to pick up a hit point increase as well as an ability score improvement. And for this, we're just going to jack it straight into Dex. This is where things can get interesting. You can go to fire level 5 if you really need the extra attack. I all but recommend it. Or this is where we can start our multi-classing. First, we're going to take 2 levels in Barbarian. Drizzt spends some time by himself in the Underdark, in exile. And he grows a little bit feral, to the point where he actually adopts a new persona he nicknames the Hunter. And to simulate this, we're going to take these next 2 levels in Barbarian. At level 5 as well, we pick up Darkness from being a Drow, which is a fantastic spell that gets used a lot by Drizzt as well. At level 6, we're going to continue getting Barbarian. This will get us Danger Sense, which gives us advantage on dexterity saving throws against trapped spells and surfaces, which is fantastic and mimics his perfect sense of balance, and his usual attentiveness in most dangerous situations. Along with this, we also get Reckless Attack. Just being able to toggle on advantage on attack rolls sometimes can be a godsend if you just need to burst that damage out. Granting advantage to your enemies is not that great, but you can get your AC to some ridiculous numbers pretty quick even with a build like this, so it's not too awful much to worry about. But when things do hit you, it might hurt a little, and this Barbarian couple of levels might help mitigate that damage a touch. We're finally going to start taking some levels in Ranger. With this, we get a favorite enemy right out of the gate. I go with Keeper of the Veil because one of the first things Drizzt finds himself constantly contending with is a lot of demons, extraplanar beings, fiends, and all sorts of whatnot. Keeper of the Veil fits perfectly into this, and it grants us an extra proficiency in Arcana, as well as a spell protection from evil and good, which comes in handy more often than you will give it credit. Along with this, we also gain Natural Explorer. With this, I recommend Urban Tracker, simply for the proficiency in Sleight of Hand, which will allow your Drizzt knockoff here to be able to pick locks. Not quite as good as a Starion can or any other rogue, but at least be competent at it. Later on, we are going to get enough levels to where we can pick up a second one of these, and for that, we're going to pick up Wasteland Wanderer Cold. I bring this up because I've only managed to get this tune up to level 10, as I have not even beaten the game yet. We also get an extra skill proficiency. With this, obviously, I would pick Stealth for the simple fact that Drizzt is very, very stealthy. He's almost like a combination of a ninja and a paladin. It's a little frightening. Oh, and basically Batman later on when he suddenly starts kicking tables in half. At level 7, we're once again going to take another level in Ranger. Honestly, we're just going to stick with Ranger for the rest of the entirety of his leveling. For the spells we pick up at this level, I actually recommend Enhanced Leap, which, utility-wise, I can't ask for anything better. I find too many jumps where I really wish I would have Drizzt in the lead, and he can't quite make them because we kind of dumped his strength stat. And Enhanced Leap, being that it's a ritual spell, comes in handy, as that'll be the only time I really end up finding myself using it. There have been some combat scenarios where it has come in handy, but they're few and far between. Along with Longstrider, which grants us 10 extra movement speed. This in itself can also be a godsend. It's also a ritual spell, and once you get second level spell slots, you can start casting on 2 people at once, which is amazing because it does not require concentration and it will stick with you until you have a long rest. And now we get a second fighting style. This is fantastic, seeing as how we already have defense from fighter. We can pick up 2-weapon fighting. Do know that later on you may end up having to respec out of this, as there will be a pair of bracers, which I'm oddly enough currently wearing, which will also grant you this fighting style, kind of making it redundant. So instead, what we're going to pick up is archery. Being a ranger and being an elf, it wouldn't really do him much justice if you couldn't shoot a bow with any decent competency. And finally, Ranger level 3, we finally get to pick our specialization. This is a fantastic point where I occasionally get into arguments over just what specialization fits Drizzt the best. For the spells, however, before we get into all that, I would recommend Hunter's Mark, simply because your damage, if you stick with Twin Scimitars, will not be great. You're constantly going to be out damaged pretty quick and pretty early on, as magical scimitars usually have conditions you have to meet for them to do extra damage. Hunter's Mark will help fill that gap a little bit and meet some of those conditions when you encounter them. Though eventually when we get another one, we will be picking up Speak with Animals because this is one of the best spells in the game. Why? Talking to a squirrel is hilarious, and that's enough reason by itself. Drizzt himself can't actually speak with animals, but there's no reason to miss out on it in the game just for that one sole reason. I actually recommend Speak with Animals just for how hilarious it is. And onto the somewhat touchy part, the subclass. I've gotten into so many arguments with people about how he's not a Beastmaster Ranger, I lost all care for the argument. Drizzt himself is not a Beastmaster Ranger. He has an figure of wondrous power that grants him access to an extra-planar panther called Guinevere. It is not actually part of him being a ranger. Him and Guinevere were actually even fantastic friends before he was a ranger. Before, I would say, he took barbarian levels and just survived in the wilds of the Underdark. No, we're not going to pick up Beastmaster Ranger. We're instead going to pick up Gloomstalker, which, honestly, I would say fits perfectly with this build. We get a bonus action hide akin to a rogue, which is beautiful. We get Umbral Shroud, which turns us invisible, which is fantastic. Disguise Self, which has its points. There is a point in the books as well where Drizzt actually finds himself in possession of a magical mask that can change his appearance. He actually uses it to get through some rather heinous situations because he's a dark elf and people frown upon that. We also get Dread Ambusher. This is fantastic. We gain a +3 bonus to our initiative. On the first turn of combat, our movement speed increases further by 10 feet, and we can make an extra attack that deals an additional 1d8 damage. This helps fill that lacking in damage slot. It's only for the first turn, granted, but you can do a lot with that first turn to set up for later and get some extreme damage out. Along with this, we also get Superior Dark Vision, and we can see up to 80 feet in the dark. Very situational, it's fun, it's nice to be able to see in the dark and just scream I have dark vision. At Ranger level 4, this is where I personally start thinking about taking other feats to kind of help fill some of the gaps I miss in my builds. Some of the great ones you can take for this particular build include Skilled, because Drizzt is a man of many, many talents, and Skilled helps fill some of those gaps you might be lacking in. Savage Attacker is fantastic and kind of mimics Drizzt's personal lethality when it comes to his combat prowess. The way he's described in the books is he rarely ever misses, more often than not he's parried, and when he wounds hard and painfully. Mobile is also another fun feat to consider, increasing your movement speed, difficult terrain not slowing you down when you dash, and after you make a melee attack, you don't provoke opportunity attacks from your target. This is a fantastic way to disengage without using disengage, and we're going to be using our action and bonus action a lot just for attacking, so this is kind of handy to have just as a free disengage. Martial Adept isn't a bad idea either. We get 2 more maneuvers that we're not going to be able to get out of more fighter levels because we're not taking a more fighter. We get an extra superiority die to add to our pool, and overall it's just a great option. It just gives you more versatility, and it gives you more things to play with. Mage Slayer is a fun one, and fits very well with the build and who Drizzt is. When a creature casts a spell within melee range of you, you have advantage on any saving throw against it, and you can use a reaction to immediately make an attack against the caster. Enemies you hit have disadvantage on concentration saving throws. I love this feat. And I'm not going to lie, you run into spellcasters a lot, and this comes in handy if you can get Drizzt up to them, because not only that they face off with an angry fighter, barbarian, ranger, dual-wielding scimitars and doing kind of buttloads of damage, but also you have disadvantage on your concentration saving throw for that poison cloud or cloud kill you got up that's currently wrecking the rest of the party. It's fun thematically as well. Lucky, there's no reason not to at least consider this. You get 3 points of luck, which you can gain advantage on attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws, or make an enemy reroll their attack rolls. It's hard not justifying this feat, other than the fact it drives every DM that's ever seen it crazy when they have to deal with it. Dual Wielder, strangely enough, I also recommend. I recommend only for that +1 bonus to the armor class while wielding a melee weapon in each hand. You're not going to get much of a benefit if you stick with dual scimitars like I am, but that +1 armor class, though, it's hard to argue with. And again, a +1 armor class sometimes will save your butt more often than not. Or, if you just like blowing your reaction on everything, you can also pick up Defensive Duelist. When you're attacked while wielding a finesse weapon that you are proficient with, you can use your reaction to add your proficiency bonus to your armor class, possibly causing the attack to miss. I like this as the idea as the Twinkle Parry, as I like to call it. In fact, I'm going to snag that one for this. Athlete is also another viable option. You'd be surprised how often you'll actually get knocked prone. Alert is also another fun option. +5 bonus to initiative, can't be surprised. Ensure you're always going first in the initiative, and making sure that you just have that absurd amount of damage already out and about. And unfortunately, I only have this tuned up to level 10, so that's kind of all we get to see on my end. I have to say, as a 5e player and DM for many years now, working both with source material and my own homebrews, meticulously balancing it all the time, this is one of my most versatile characters I've made when it comes to combat, support, and damage. It can be a great addition to most parties with its decent damage potential, utility to the party, ensuring your scout is never alone if not just being the scout. As for how close to the mark we can get within Baldur's Gate 3, we can all but accurately and reliably recreate Drizzt down to his unparalleled speed across the battle, unsurpassed prowess, and the racial prejudice he faces nigh constantly throughout his life due to his heritage. As mentioned, damage at first is a little middling compared to your party members, but that will quickly begin to steamroll into a flurry of blades as more levels and gear become available, making your Drizzt Do'Urden a true menace to your foes. Roleplay-wise, the choices I found myself with align well to the ideals of this Drow Ranger. The classic folk hero doing good for the sake of good and always trying to see all sides of the conflict while reminding others he is much unlike his people with the choice of Seldarine Drow fit very well, and just work very well overall throughout the game. I constantly find myself having to remind myself that I am playing as Drizzt, and some choices I might personally make may not be the same ones he would make, and I quickly find both options readily available in most conversations. This is easily one of my favorite playthroughs just due to how well the game lends itself to being a Dark Elf folk hero and makes you feel the part of Drizzt lost to the Sword Coast with an affliction that only dark and powerful entities can possibly cure him of. Not far-fetched given the long history of Drizzt Do'Urden. It's not hard to picture him literally in this very scenario, given some of his adventures, just being plucked off of whatever adventure he was in the middle of by an illithid nautiloid just out of the blue, and next thing you know, he finds himself having to just rid himself of this problem while also dealing with all these whole new slew of issues that come across from it. It just works. Now then, I'm adding this simply due to the fact one day messing around I tried to change a hireling's appearance with the mirror and found it would not accommodate me, which was sad because I was thinking of how I would even do this series using that as a feature. But it wasn't long after that, I swear, the patch rolled out where we can change our hireling's appearances, all but predicting it would happen just from that one shred of curiosity I had. So now, just in case I'm suddenly an orb to ponder into for the future, I'm laying out my hopes for future patches and content here. I will try to do this for most of these videos, but honestly, there's not a whole lot I actually want more from this game, other than just maybe some new content. So, starting off with my kind of number one thing, a new Game Plus feature. This would be hilarious for those of us who just want to be the OP heroes we end up as, and go through the game not as some poor fledgling adventurer or some high-end, all-knowing, powerful being that got stripped of everything because of a mind flare tapple scrambling their minds, but an established one who looks at such a challenge with a grin rather than grimace. Along with this, custom hirelings, or the ability for a player to create a custom character no matter where you're at in the plot or in the story. Just the ability to create a hireling from scratch, or should a friend decide to join us on our adventures when we're midway through it, and completely customize it from start to finish. While somewhat of a small thing, I would personally love it if I could just make an entire party of the companions of the hall without figuring out which hireling I'd give the least plastic surgery to along with a respec. Along with this, bug fixes. There are not many left since the days I started way back in early access when we only had some part of Act 1 and a little bit more later on just as it was getting ready to roll out for the full release. There is a few though that I find are still a little game breaking. Party members having issues following you over certain gaps because for some reason the AI forgets how to jump in that moment. That one kind of gets me still. It kind of bugs me still. Pun intended. But another glaring one I found is when me and my wife are playing split screen, and for some reason her camera will focus on my character but not hers. I'm not sure what's causing this, as her controller is in fact controlling her character in the moment, as if it's selected, but her camera is still focused on my character for some reason. It's a small thing, and with a little bit of messing around, we did kind of find a fix for it, but it does happen a little bit more often than we like. Beyond that, this is easily my vote for Game of the Year on many aspects, and not all of them. The music, the gameplay, the graphics, the animation, the story, the lore, the monsters, puzzles, hilarity, grief, and of course, all the dice rolls. I can't wait to see just what Larian does with the future of this game and expect it to continue to be glorious. But until that time comes, remember to like, share, and subscribe, as well as leave a comment about what character you might want to see in the virtual flesh of Baldur's Gate 3, as the options aren't very limited on just what you can make. Until then though, stay radical viewers, and we'll see you all in the next video. See you then.